Happy Friday, everyone. A couple of things at the top, and then I'll get to your questions. Answer them to the best of my ability. Let's start off with just an update on the Secretary's travel. He's on the ground in Kigali, Rwanda, working with our international partners to secure an ambitious amendment to the Montreal Protocol that would phase down the use of hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs, which are potent greenhouse gases. Negotiations are ongoing, and we're optimistic of achieving an agreement. These talks, as you know, are part of a wave of momentum to address climate issues. Just last week, for example, we crossed the final threshold into the entry into force of the Paris Agreement. And we also saw the International Civil Aviation Organization adopt a measure based on carbon neutral growth in the international aviation sector. An ambitious amendment to the Montreal Protocol would be another major step forward in our ongoing efforts to work with the international community to tackle the shared challenge of climate change. In Kigali, the Secretary also met with President Kagame, and he also visited Rwanda's National Genocide Memorial. Today, Ambassador Nancy Stetson, the U.S. Special Representative for Habitat 3 and Global Food Security, is traveling to Quito, Ecuador, to serve as Deputy Head of Delegation for the United States to the United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, which is also referred to as Habitat 3. Habitat 3 will be the first time in 20 years that the international community has come together to reflect on and plan for the mega trend of rapid urbanization. UN member states will adopt the new urban agenda, a vision for sustainable urbanization, as well as a new set of agreed voluntary standards of achievement. This agenda reinforces the crucial linkages between urbanization and sustainable development goals, as well as the Paris Agreement on climate change, among other important shared global aspirations. Matt?
Let's start with Syria. There have been some suggestions, actually, I think a report actually from a state or a state-affiliated news agency that the Iranians are not going to attend this meeting in Lausanne. What's your understanding of who's going to be there now?
Well, again, we've been pretty consistent in saying that we're going to leave it up to the countries themselves to confirm their attendance. I have not seen that report out of Iran.
Have you? Well, I mean, do you expect to be a representative of Iran there?
I don't think we were certain, to be honest.
As a key player. I mean,
we would like Iran to be there, but I'm not sure that they've confirmed yet.
Okay, and then just more broadly on the meeting, is there any hope or expectation that it will produce the desired result, which I presume, but correct me if I'm wrong, is some kind of truce, a temporary one at least, that could then be extended? And is there any expectation that might actually happen?
I certainly don't want to overplay or underplay our expectations for Lausanne. I think that you're right, that the urgent need right now in front of us is some kind of cessation of hostilities, or at least a significant reduction in the level of violence, certainly in and around Aleppo, and that's going to be a primary focus. But more broadly, you know the framework we're working within, which is to try to get a cessation, and once you get that cessation, then we can talk about next steps, which include getting negotiations back up and running in Geneva, as well as access for humanitarian assistance throughout Syria. So, I mean, the essential challenges are the same. That's going to be the topic of discussion in Lausanne. I think this, if I had to frame it, I don't know that I would expect any breakthroughs. I would just say that we're looking to get this multilateral effort, an approach to Syria up and running.
Okay.
Yep. Are we ready to walk away from Syria? Are you in Syria, or are you done with Syria? Great, let's go. Go ahead, Gwen.
This is Iraq.
Okay.
Okay. The British Foreign Ministry
just hosted a delegation from the Iraqi Foreign Ministry I should say the British Foreign Office, my apologies.
Okay.
Just hosted a delegation from the Iraqi Foreign Ministry headed by the Iraqi Foreign Minister, but it included the head of the Kurdistan region's Foreign Relations Office. Mm-hmm. Is that a format for discussions that you might consider in the future so that the concerns of the Kurdistan region are properly heard?
Look, I think we've already been coordinating pretty closely with both the Kurdistan regional government as well as the government of Iraq. We've been in close and constant communication with them through a variety of different means, obviously in person, but also via telephone, via email, all with the aim of coordinating upcoming efforts to liberate Mosul. And obviously that's a very complex operation, and we need to be coordinated. And we understand that the more we can discuss and coordinate with the various fighting forces, the better off the overall effort will be. Obviously, always any operation on Mosul will be under the command and control of the Iraqi government. But as much as, again, all these different fighting forces can be coordinated, it's to the overall betterment of the effort.
Beyond Mosul, would you consider this a format just so that the people in the Kurdistan region, that their views are also represented in their discussions in the discussions the United States has with the Iraqis?
Again, I don't want to, get ahead of the immediate challenge, which is Mosul. But I think in general, we're in very close contact and in frequent contact with President Barzani, with other senior regional government officials to talk about not only the efforts to defeat and destroy and degrade Daesh, but also the response to the humanitarian needs and also the IDP, the internally displaced people. That's a real crisis as well in Iraq. So we're talking about all these issues all the time. We're already closely coordinated. We're already talking to these various groups, as well as the Iraqi government, closely already. Please. Philippines, go.
Filipino President Duterte is going to pay a state visit to China prior to any visit to U.S. ally countries. First of all, does it bother you?
Not at all. Obviously, the Philippines' relationship with China is an important one. It's important to the region, and strong relations between China and the Philippines, frankly, we believe is important to regional security. So we don't view it as any type of slight or in any way overlooking the importance of our own relations, our own bilateral relationship with the Philippines. We view it as a positive thing.
Yesterday, President Duterte had an interview with my colleague in Manila, in which he said he wanted to resume the friendship between Philippines and China. And he said he was grateful for China not to interfere how he run the country, how he fight for the drug war. My question is, do you think the tension between United States and the Philippines may further force Philippines to pivot to China?
Look, I can't speak to President Duterte's vision of his foreign policy. That's for his own foreign minister to speak to, as well as President Duterte. Our focus is obviously on maintaining our close relations with the Philippines, and we've been trying to do that. We want to cooperate and continue to cooperate with the Philippines on the range of areas that we cooperate in. And that includes counter-narcotics as well as security. That said, and this is not specific to the Philippines, we're always going to be clear when we see credible allegations of human rights abuses or of any kind of actions by the government or by security forces. And again, I'm not being specific to the Philippines. We're going to be frank and candid about our concerns. That's part of we believe, a strong bilateral relationship with any country. As to whether he's pivoting east or west, I can't speak to that. Certainly, it's in the Philippines' interest to have strong relations in the region, and as much as this is an effort in that direction, we would support it.
What's your view of the potential arms sales between Philippines and China? Because right now, the Chinese government and Filipino government, they are negotiating a 25-year military agreement. What's your view on it? And could you please update us on what's the current status of the United States arms sales to Philippines? I think Matt raised the question 2 days ago.
With regard to potential arms sales or arms agreements with China, again, we wouldn't necessarily have a comment on that. It's the Philippines' prerogative to make its own choices in terms of who it engages in these kinds of deals with. I don't know if I have an update on our own the status of our own. Sorry, I'm just looking through my book quickly here. Let me see if I can get you something on that. I didn't realize you had asked the other day. I apologize. Sure. Let's finish. You said on Philippines? Yeah, sure. Let's finish with that.
Earlier this week, the Philippine Senate ended its hearings on state involvement on the violence in the drug war. I was wondering if you had a comment.
Well, again, I think I would just say what I just said previously is that where we support, broadly speaking, efforts by the Philippines, the government of the Philippines to take on the challenge of narco trafficking and drug trafficking, and frankly, the terrible effects that can have on a society. It's obviously of great concern to the president, as he's spoken about it many times. But certainly, in any effort to attack that kind of problem, I think that you have to be mindful of the approach, how you approach it. And certainly we would be concerned by any reports of extrajudicial killings by or at the behest of government authorities in the Philippines, and would encourage, where there are credible allegations, for the government of the Philippines to conduct thorough and transparent investigations into those reports. And more broadly, again, just urge that the Philippines ensures that its law enforcement officers are consistent with their international human rights obligations.
It looks like, I mean, the ending of the hearings is an indication that they've ended sort of the investigation. The chairman of the hearing said that the hearings have failed to prove that the president is involved and the state is involved in the violence.
I've not seen the specific results of those hearings. I'm just saying broadly what our concerns are and how we'd like to see the Philippine government address them. If we have comment on the actual findings of the hearings, we'll certainly add those. Please.
So, is the United States getting mixed messages from the Philippine government?
I'm sorry, I was caught there.
Sorry.
Okay.
Is the United States getting mixed messages from the Philippine government? Because it seems Duterte says one thing, his defense minister comes out and says the alliance is strong. Who is the United States supposed to listen to in this?
Fair question. I think we've been pretty consistent in our approach, which is while certainly we don't want to discount some of the rhetoric and some of the things said by the leadership in the Philippines, what we look at most closely is at a working level whether the cooperation and the receptivity of the Philippine government is still there. And we have not seen any indication at that working level, at bilateral level, of turning away from the United States. So we're going to continue to, obviously, to pursue those bilateral relations. As I said, we have a very strong, very long, historic relationship with the Philippines, and we're going to continue to pursue that. Yeah, Russ.
First, a housekeeping question.
Sure.
Apparently, the president's having a meeting a little bit later this afternoon to talk about possible military actions in Syria. Is there any representation from state at this meeting?
I wouldn't be able to speak to those meetings. I'd refer you to the White House.
Okay. and
But
then-
I can say broadly speaking that we continue to look at a range of options with regard to next steps on Syria.
Public, it's on the president and the vice
I said that, but
president's
I wouldn't- I'm
schedule.
not gonna speak
I know,
to it
but
from
who
here.
from state is going to go?
I don't know.
And then regarding Israel's decision to suspend its working relationship with UNESCO over the draft resolution about the Temple Mount or Al-Aqsa Mosque, does the U.S. have a reaction to Israel's decision? Does it endorse Israel's decision? What can be done to persuade UNESCO to change this resolution or withdraw it?
Well, as you know, we actively opposed the resolution, and we did work in partnership with Israel and like-minded member states, really to discourage other UNESCO members from pursuing this resolution. I'll let the Israelis speak to their decisions with regard to the relationship with UNESCO and their role in UNESCO. It's their prerogative, obviously, to have serious concerns in the wake of these, as we talked about yesterday, these continual resolutions that we believe at the very least cast Israel in a very unfair light. They're very politicized and anti-Israel. With regard to, I forget the second part of your question, with regard to our own role or our own approach to UNESCO?
Is there any way of persuading the body to either change the language in the resolution or persuade them to withdraw it altogether? I mean, the chief of UNESCO has condemned the resolution herself, but she doesn't have the power, it seems, to do anything about it.
Right. Look, I mean, if those avenues are open to us, we'll certainly pursue them. Unfortunately, the resolution passed. But more broadly, we feel it's important, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, that the U.S. was still a member of the executive board and able to have a voice, able to express its dissent with this resolution. And going forward, we believe it's important that the United States remain engaged with UNESCO, not only to block or discourage these kinds of anti-Israel resolutions, but also to, frankly, pursue a very affirmative agenda of what UNESCO can accomplish. It's doing important work in CVE, on climate change, World Heritage Sites, and other educational programs. So there are important roles for and important programs that UNESCO's pursuing. And so we're going to keep trying to put forth a positive agenda.
And finally, President Abbas welcomed the passage of the resolution. Is that regrettable on his part?
I think in the sense that these kinds of resolutions are counterproductive to what our overall goal is here, which is creating a climate that is conducive to the two parties getting back to some kind of settlement process with regard to peace in the Middle East. And so as much as any of these kinds of resolutions cast a negative shadow on those efforts, then we would find them counterproductive. Please. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Two things.
Yeah.
One, the White House says it's a National Security Council meeting. The National Security Council is defined by the White House itself as including the President, the Vice President, the Secretary of State, Defense, and so on. Even if there won't be a state representative physically at the meeting, can you not say whether or not someone from the State Department will take part in the meeting somehow?
Certainly, if there is a meeting and an interagency discussion on Syria, then of course the State Department will be represented in some way, shape, or form. I just don't know the details.
And then one second thing, I imagine you've seen the quotes from Syrian President Assad saying that taking eastern Aleppo will be a good springboard to then push the terrorists back to Turkey. Does the U.S. government, what is the U.S. government's policy to try to prevent that from happening?
Well, President Assad has a very different definition, I think, of terrorists than we do. Obviously, our goal is to pursue Daesh, defeat and destroy them in the battlefield, working with some of the groups that we've been working with, certainly in northern Syria. And frankly, one of the goals, the missed opportunities from this failed September 9th agreement from Geneva was the opportunity to jointly work with Russia on going after Nusra. And Russia has said that's one of their objectives as well. But that said, we view as Nusra and Al-Qaeda as the major threats, certainly to our national security, but also threats to the region's security. And we're going to continue to pursue our efforts to defeat them.
Do you oppose the notion of Assad's forces pushing all the way to the Turkish border?
I mean, we oppose what Assad's forces are currently doing in leveling the city of Aleppo in what they claim is a pursuit to go after these terrorists, when in fact they're going at much of their airstrikes and much of the assault is aiming at the moderate opposition. So I'd even take a step back and say not only would we not support them going further, we want them to stop right now where they're at so that we can get a political track back up and running in Geneva. If we get there, and it's a big if, then, as we talked about before, all other options or all other opportunities are on the table, which is going after Nusra and going after Daesh more constructively and more productively, not with the regime, but with Russia. But we didn't get there. So,
And beyond trying to get back to the diplomatic track, do you have any other policies to stop Assad's forces from pushing on further?
well, I mean, I think we're looking at, and I don't want to get ahead of discussions, meetings that have yet to take place, but we've been very clear in the wake of our suspension of bilateral engagement with Russia on Syria. We've been looking at a range of options, economic, ways to put military pressure, ways to put economic pressure, other ways to put pressure and gain leverage given the situation in Syria. We're trying to be thoughtful about it. We're soliciting the views, obviously, of everyone involved in the interagency before we move forward. And again, what Secretary Kerry's been focused on is how do we go back to the multilateral setting and harness the ideas and the leverage that other countries may have with regard to Syria, and use that to put forward a new diplomatic process. Please.
On the WikiLeaks dump today, there was one email in particular between John Podesta and Cheryl Mills asking about holding emails from President Obama and Secretary Clinton back. Why weren't those turned over? Would they not fall under work-related?
You're talking about emails between John Podesta and...
I'm sorry, there was an email that suggested there were emails between President Obama and Secretary Clinton, and in Podesta's email, he's saying we should try and have these held back. You have the president use executive privilege to hold those back.
I believe there are, yeah, I believe, and I'd have to double check on that, but I believe with correspondence with the president, there was, I don't know if it was executive privilege, but there was a concern that those emails not be made public.
Is there a reason why?
I think, again, I don't have the chapter and verse in front of me, but I think it's some form of executive privilege. I'd have to get back to you on what the exact wording is. I just don't know what the rationale is, that the correspondence with the president has certain privileges and privacies, but I don't have the exact chapter and verse in front of me.
Mark,
Yes, Goyle.
couple of questions. Thanks, sir. Couple of questions on South Asia. One, what is the U.S. stand at the UN Security Council resolution as far as declaring some of the terrorists wanted by the U.S. and India, but China has twice again last week supported Pakistan and saying that they are not terrorists. So innocent people are being killed in the name of terrorism, but China is supporting Pakistan at the United Nations.
Which
Some of those includes Hafiz Saeed, Ram Dawood, and also Masood Azhar, among others.
I'm not 100% sure I know which resolution you're talking about, but I would just say that we continue to urge Pakistan to take actions to combat and delegitimize all terrorist groups operating on its soil. Obviously, Pakistan suffered greatly at the hands of terrorists and violent extremists. We want to help Pakistan confront this terrorist threat, but we also want Pakistan also to go after those terrorists who seek and sometimes find safe haven on Pakistan territory.
This resolution came twice at the United Nations Security Council that these people should be declared terrorists by the United Nations Security Council, but China vetoed or said that they are not terrorists or supported Pakistan. So what is U.S. stand there?
Again, I'm not aware of the specific resolution. I apologize, Goyle. I'd refer you to our team up at USUN, who can probably speak with more depth than I have on this particular issue.
In the name of terrorism, innocent peoples are being killed in the thousands in Pakistan. And now the Pakistanis are asking that time has come to put this end. And this was in the name of this Mr. Altaf Hussain in London, who is the MQM founder and chairman, and he was held there for allegation that money laundering, in the name of money laundering, or cases against him in London. And thousands of people were rounded up in Karachi, and hundreds were killed, and that's what he said, that now the British court freed him and said there are all allegations and there is no truth.
Well, I'd refer you to the British government to speak to that particular case. I think we've spoken out about this individual before, so leave it there. Please, Matt. Oh,
Sorry, just one question about Iraq.
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
There were reports today that some of the Iraqi army units, which were sent to participate in an upcoming operation in Mosul, they were raising sectarian flags, Shia flags. Would that alarm you? And because, as you know, Mosul is a predominantly Sunni city, which could be problematic.
Well, we all know the reality of the effort in Iraq involves local tribal forces and so-called PMF, Popular Mobilization Forces. They've been instrumental, frankly, in much of the success that the Iraqi government and security forces have had against Daesh. I don't know about this particular incident, but we've said before that these groups need to be mindful, need not to create more tensions as they operate among the local populations, and need to be respectful of the local populations in terms of respectful of their religion, and respectful of their human rights.
Thank you.
I got two different subjects.
Yeah.
One, first on Yemen.
Yeah.
What's the status of the review into the assistance that you're providing to Saudis?
No update on that, Matt. I know we're going to do a background call shortly, but I don't have anything to
I mean,
add
is
on that.
this review just going to go on and on and on and on? And so
No, I wouldn't say that either.
you can say with certainty that there will be an end to this review with a conclusion about
where we go.
whether or not to continue.
I mean,
or to
honestly,
modify the
I can
assistance
say
that
when
you're
we
gonna
when we say we're going to conduct a review, we conduct a review. I can't speak to where it will land, what its conclusions will be, but as we've said and said quite forcefully last week, last weekend after the strike on that hit the funeral procession or gathering, that we have very serious concerns about civilian casualties, and we're reviewing our assistance.
I understand. I'm not asking you for what the results of
Okay.
the review is going to be. I'm just, it will come to an end at some
I
point.
believe
Is
so,
that
yes,
right?
yes.
And in the near future?
I hope so, yes.
All right. And then secondly.
Because you'll make sure I hear about it if otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. And then the second one is on Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys certified that they have met their human rights obligations? I think I asked about this a couple of weeks ago, and then it slipped my.
Sure. So we certified that Honduras has taken effective steps to meet the criteria specified in the fiscal year 2016 appropriation legislation. So that's not to say that all is well and good. Obviously, corruption, crime, impunity are real problems, continue to be real problems in Honduras. But we have seen, I think, a demonstration of political will by the Honduran government that has taken on and made progress against some of the country's security and developmental challenges. So we want to see that progress continue.
When was that certification done?
My understanding is it was, September 30th, 2016.
Any reason why it's taken so long to?
Publicly announce it?
Yes.
I don't know, honestly. I mean,
I
I don't know how we generally make.
Was it published in the Federal Register?
I don't know. I'll
All right,
ask.
and then can you be more specific about what effective steps they have taken? Because as you were aware, there have been numerous reports over the course of, over a while, but certainly over the course of the last couple of months about new abuses and about new
right.
But committed by the police and by security forces there.
I mean, I can speak a little bit about what our assistance programs do in Honduras, but I don't have specific. I don't have a specific. I'll get that for you.
So when you made the certification, there wasn't any attempt to define what it was?
I'm sure there was. I just don't have it in front of me, and I'm not following as closely as I probably should Honduran human rights
What's the
situation.
Total assistance that this frees up?
I will get that for you as well. Don't have it in front of me. Apologize.
And please, if you could get the actual the
So what I propose, we'll do this as a formal taken question. Okay.
I mean, because there've been persistent reports of violations.
I understand that. No, I understand that, Matt, and I understand. Again, I'm not trying to create the appearance that all is well.
Well, I know, but if all is not well and all is not good, why do they get certified?
Well, again, I think we look for progress, and we've seen significant enough progress in their efforts, and I should have more detail to provide to you on that. I apologize for it, but to give them a passing grade. Is that it, guys? Thanks so much. Yep.